Welcome to another Executive Conversation, hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Johnny Taylor, President and CEO of the Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM, the world's largest HR professional society with nearly 300,000 members located around the world. Johnny recently started in this position after serving as the President and CEO of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. Johnny, thank you very much for joining us today. It's a tremendous pleasure and treat for us, so thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about what the mission of SHRM is and why should anyone be a member of SHRM?
Well, there are 300,000 members around the globe. They are professionals, HR professionals, and our mission is, essentially to elevate HR. And I know that may sound a little overly simplistic, but at the end of the day, we want not only our members to be equipped to practice good HR, but we want people who are the recipients of good HR to appreciate why it matters. So elevating the profession, elevating the function, and essentially letting the world know that people matter, people in the workplace matter, and that we are the professional society responsible for making that, messaging that appropriately.
And you have a really remarkable background, having touched on a number of things, including a law background and practicing legal work. Can you say a little bit about how that has informed your world and your vision about what HR means?
So I began my career as a lawyer. And first as a tax lawyer, actually, and then I became a labor and employment lawyer. There were a lot of tax implications to labor and employment law, but ultimately became a labor and employment lawyer. What I learned and I saw really over time was we were reacting. The lawyers were getting involved after, frankly, a lot of mistakes have been made in management and in HR. So I decided that I could actually be much more effective and value added to the organization if I were able to prevent a lot of the issues from becoming legal issues, and thus my interest in HR. So my thought was, and ultimately it's played out, is that HR, when done well, will limit the opportunities for people to have to interact with the courts to solve disputes between employees and employers.
So that explains a lot about how the legal side of your background helped inform your HR side. You then also became head of organizations, CEO, et cetera. So how did the HR inform that part of your world?
So when you're in HR, you often say people matter. Well, obviously you'd say that because you're in the people business. What I began to realize when I took my first P&L assignment was 70 to 80% of the time that I spent on people matters. I literally chronicled in my diary, my daily calendar, what do I spend time doing? So I wrote it down, and at the end of the 6 months or so, I looked back and said, almost 70%, and sometimes 80% of my time is spent on people issues. It's not business strategy. It's not finances. It's not marketing. I mean, you'll get some of that when you work with your marketing person and your legal person, et cetera. But at the end of the day, most of my work was about finding the right people, engaging those people and keeping them engaged in the work that we needed done, motivating them, and then ultimately getting rid of the wrong people. And that's when the aha moment hit for me. I was like, oh my gosh, HR is literally the core to every organization. And I'm not just saying business, every organization. I use that intentionally because I've spent time running for-profit companies as well as nonprofit organizations. And it is so true over now a decade of this work. I can tell you in the top seat, most of your time is focused on HR issues. Now, the flip side of that is rarely have I run into really, really good HR people. Very well-intentioned, very good, nice people, and moderately competent. But the people who could really change the game for me, help me find the right people, help me motivate those people, get rid of the wrong people, that required a level of HR expertise that I didn't see a lot in the workplace. And so I became very motivated to help build this profession so that there are more of them. So it's sort of a selfish reason for getting into this business.
So why is it, do you think, there's basically a lack of talent in the way you've just described it?
It's the perception of HR. I talked about the need from a mission standpoint to elevate HR. because the perception of HR is sort of where the least talented people go, or where the problem kids go in an organization. It's where you kind of move people out of the way. The best and brightest talent don't want to come in. Who wants to be associated with that? I want to be a lawyer because lawyers are held in high esteem and respected in the profession. Even if you don't like them, and we make jokes about lawyers, you respect what they do and their contributions, their ability to impact the world. And that's what's missing right now. And until we fix that, we're not going to be able to attract the best and brightest people to HR. And so the problem will persist. It's this horrible, vicious cycle.
So as the CEO of the largest HR organization in the world, how do you make that change?
Well, we're doing a couple of things. One, it's sort of a grassroots and a treetop strategy at once. The treetop strategy is focusing on the business elites and the policy elites. That is, those decision makers on Capitol Hill and state legislatures all over the country, and indeed the world. We're trying to influence them so that they begin to understand people issues and understand that HR are the right people to help them navigate people issues. Complex issues are in HR's sort of sweet spot around people. At the same time, we have to go to the policy elites and get them to understand that making a policy without talking to people who live every day with the practical implications of that policy is dumb. And that HR people want to be there as a resource and can really inform good policy. That's our treetops strategy. Then there's this effort. We've got to now bring in really talented students. The next generation of business leaders have to be interested in HR, and not just HR theoretically, but HR practice. I oftentimes say HR people are business people too. There's this, we find this problem where you often hear people say, well, they're the business people and then they're the HR people. And HR people say it more often than not, and it drives me nuts. I'm like, all of us are business people. The marketing person is a business person with an expertise in marketing. The finance person has an expertise in finance. The HR person is a business person with an expertise in people and human resources. And until we change that mindset, starting with the students that you have coming up in your MBA programs, in your arts and sciences, liberal arts programs, wherever they come from, if they have an interest, a genuine interest in looking at people and figuring out how to drive results in their organizations through people, then they should come to HR.
So how do we get that word out better around the world? So it sounds great. Will this really just come from the treetops strategy and it'll eventually trickle down, or is there something we need to be doing proactively at the grassroots side?
Well, we're doing two things, and it is, some of it absolutely is going to happen when we can create some buzz. SHRM has local chapters and student chapters where we're capturing students who aren't in HR school per se, but are just coming in and they're trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. We're saying, here's an option, and this is notwithstanding what you may have thought about HR, or if you even thought about HR, here's a career opportunity for you, and this is how it really will be meaningful. And it's more than just I like people, because I jokingly say after you practice HR for a while, there are days when you don't like people because it's really hard work, right? And you understand how complex people are. So yes, there's absolutely a coming to colleges like this, going to, new employees come into the workplace and talking about HR opportunities. But it really does require that we have thought leadership from the academy, from those of you all who are leaders and thought leaders in people metrics and people things. You've got to be drivers. People have to think about that. It's amazing to me the number of times we have conversations that are direct labor issues, but they're not being discussed with people in the HR space. So immigration. Immigration is ultimately a workforce issue. Ultimately. Okay, we have a shortage of people, we have a skills gap, and we need more people with better skills. And if Americans are having fewer children, and we know that they've been having fewer children, the birth rate is lowered since 2000, then immigration from a workforce, put aside morality, put aside politics, but from a pure workforce standpoint is something we need to consider. So HR needs to be involved, and that's an HR discussion. The more we can do those sorts of things, tie conversations, everyday conversations back to HR, people will begin to get it. And so we're running a commercial campaign right now on CNN, NBC, Fox, all of the major networks. And we're talking about the skills gap. We're talking about workplace culture, which leads to hopefully fewer and fewer instances of harassment. We're talking about immigration. We're saying these are issues that you normally wouldn't think of as HR issues, but they are exactly HR issues.
So do you see that kind of public procurement and method for trying to change the way people are thinking about the world of HR as effectively being able to eventually get us away from the economists driving policy versus people really living it?
Precisely. The economist, educators, I love it. We talk about the 2 E's, education and employment. And it's interesting that oftentimes K through 12 educators think it's their job to educate people. And I said, to what end? Ultimately, we are going to consume your product, graduates of schools, as our employers or employees of the future. So we've got to make sure that there's nothing wrong with economists, there's nothing wrong with educators, lawyers, doctors, whatever. But at the end of the day, people, the vast and overwhelming majority of us are going to end up in someone's workplace. And so they ultimately are going to be HR issues. And that's why HR is ubiquitous. I mean, it's everywhere, omnipresent, if you will. And that's what we are really trying to get people to think. The message is all of you should have some real interest in what's going in HR.
So if you're talking to a younger person, so even before they get to the master's level or have even maybe early college or even high school, right, what's the punchline you give them to convince them that this is the profession that we want the really brightest and smartest and most motivated in this area to do all of these things you talk about?
So they talk oftentimes about revolutions and eras and, the fourth industrial revolution and this era and that era. And I say, we are finally and it's been coming, we're going from the information era to the knowledge era. And so as a result, people are going to be core to a knowledge era. So it's not the fastest machine, it's not the strongest person, it's going to be the most creative person, the most adaptable person, the most agile person. And so HR is where the sexy stuff's going to be done. The organizations that win are going to win because they have figured out HR. They have an amazing strategy that's going to deliver for the business. And so wouldn't you want to be a part of that? If you're in finance, you're counting the money. We want to be a part of delivering the money. And HR is the place where that's going to happen if done properly. And so we need the best and brightest minds to come in to do it properly.
I'm sold. I'm going to join the HR profession. So just switching gears entirely on this. Yes. Can you say a little bit about what it's like and the differences between leading an organization that is really for-profit, like some of those that you did, and you were really on the for-profit side of things, versus those that maybe are more mission-driven, like your last 2 roles?
Well, so I start with this in every conversation with nonprofit executives. No money, no mission. So core to what you do is that you've got to raise money, generate revenue somehow, no matter what side of the fence you're sitting on, for-profit or nonprofit. But what is wonderful about mission work and nonprofit work is that that's not where it ends. You actually are trying to do something to change the world, future generations. And it's fulfilling, frankly, but it matters. Every once in a while you say, I can make a lot of money. I could be a billionaire hedge fund guy, and I don't know that I made a difference in the world or not today, except for me and my kids and my family, whatever. But when you can really have a breakthrough, when you are in an HR organization, for example, and you can get one employee to really think hard about how they treated another person at work and become aware of their own biases and get them to change the way they see the world and therefore the way they act, you're really doing God's work. And not to get particularly religious or anything, but it gives so much more meaning to the work. And that's the difference. But start at a baseline, and I say this again to every nonprofit executive. It takes money to deliver on a mission. So we've got to generate revenue, and you do that every day in a for-profit or nonprofit. The big difference is it makes a difference at the end of the day.
Thank you very much for joining us. This is really a great treat and a great pleasure for me.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
You just listened to another executive conversation. Today, Johnny Taylor shared his vision of SHRM and his ideas for how the HR profession can advance the world. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.